Oh man, this is really exciting. I've been looking forward to this show for a whole year since we did this last year. You look kind of tired. Are you all right, Andres?
Yeah, and my name is Andres Lorente. Yeah, I'm sorry.
What? I was hoping for a little bit more energy for this show. What's happened?
I did what you said. I just spent the last 4 days watching every film we watched this year, preparing for this. It's like I haven't slept in 4 days.
You were just supposed to think about the films, not watch the films.
What? Now you tell me. Now you tell me.
Wow, you've just watched Killers of the Flower Moon again. Right, let's wake you up. We'll get you a coffee. We'll get our tux on, and we will do Film of the Year.
Oh my God, this is exciting. I've been waiting for this. Oh, didn't you say? I felt like I dreamed it. You were saying something about how you were waiting all year for this. I've been waiting all year for this.
If I were a cleverer man, I would have done a count up. So we've seen 23 pairings, I think, this year?
Something like that, probably,
so it's 23 new films, 23 old films. So why don't we start at the top? As a general rule, the old film is better than the new film. There have been examples when it's been the other way around.
On the average pairing, though, we do find that often. That's our tastes, of course. This is not an objective process. It's very subjective. But yeah, I think in general we find that the older films fare better.
So we'll go straight to the top. So just a quick recap.
Yeah.
Film of the Year show. We have each brought some nominations for 7 different categories, but neither of us knows what film the other has nominated. Ooh. And you, dear listener, will have to listen to us literally debate in your own ears which film we are going to give the award to.
Yeah.
So, starting with our first award of the night, here's the envelope. What, out of all the films we've seen for the pod this year, was the best film not released this year? What have you got?
I found this to be a tough category, maybe the toughest. There were so many good ones to choose from. 3 stood out. So I'll present these as my nominations. Yours might be a little different. For me, the top 3 were Women on the Verge of a Nervous Breakdown.
Okay, yes.
Grizzly Man. Boy, I think I watched that twice. In preparation for the podcast, I watched that one twice, which never happens. And then finally, well, when I talk about high stakes, big stars, big director, Max von Sydow, and honest toupees, you know that I'm talking about 3 Days of the Condor.
Oh, wow. Yes. Well, incredibly, I loved all 3 of those films, and none of them appear on my list of nominations. I have, like you, watched so many great films this year. I put 4 in my envelope. Oh my goodness, we're going to have to debate between 7 different films. First of my nominations was Once Upon a Time in the West. Yep. I had never seen a Sergio Leone movie, and now I want to see them all.
Okay.
Second on my list, Barry Lyndon.
Yep.
Which I still are going to put forward as the most beautiful film ever made.
Ooh, wow.
Third on my list was Raiders of the Lost Ark. And I know you find it comic-y and cheesy, and I think that is the point. And finally, I can't believe that you haven't mentioned, because we both watched for the first time what is literally provably the best film ever made, Jean Dielman, 23 Cahiers du Commerce.
It was great. It's the best of all time, but it's just not the best not released this year. Or is it?
Out of those 7 films, how are we possibly going to give plaudits to only one?
Okay.
If you had to narrow your list down to one, which one were you going to choose?
I think I think because it's such a kind of an epic from the 70s, the golden age of these kinds of films. I've got to go with 3 Days of the Condor. It's not necessarily my favorite, but I think it was the best one because of all those things about, like you get Robert Redford and Faye Dunaway and Max von Sydow and political elements and a great director in Sidney Pollack. I just felt like it has to be that one, but I could go with any one of the three.
It's pleasingly political and pleasingly still applicable, the sentiments and the story of 3 Days of the Condor. It's one of those pre-internet thrillers that would probably still work in the days of the internet. You'd need to change some of the details, but actually that kind of paranoia and double-crossing, that still works just as well, whether you have a smartphone or not. Lots to enjoy in 3 Days of the Condor. Absolutely, and one of the finest toupees we have seen all year. It's difficult to argue with that. I am going to put it up then against Once Upon a Time in the West, simply because I never found Charles Bronson a particularly interesting actor until I saw him in Once Upon a Time in the West. Sergio Leone's camera loves him, and now I do as well. If ever there were a film that were made for wider than widescreen, it's Once Upon a Time in the West. I don't think it deserves to be seen in scope. There should be something wider than scope with a ratio of like 6 or 7 to 1, something like that. If I see Once Upon a Time in the West, I want it to go all the way around my head. I think so wide is that film. I'm going to have to arm wrestle you for it. Which are we going to give the prize to?
I think it should be a gunfight. Honestly, I got to go with Once Upon a Time in the West.
Oh, I've won you over to my side. I won't forget you for this. Best film not released this year, Once Upon a Time in the West. What an epic tale of betrayal. What an epic piece of camera work. What an epic example of post-sync dialogue. So much to enjoy. I want to see the whole thing again. Once Upon a Time in the West, Sergio Leone. So let's talk about our second award, Scene of the Year. So I know we said the same thing last year. We were both at film school together, and at film school, one of the precepts that we were taught was that that screenwriters think in terms of character and story, but directors think in terms of scenes. The scene is the unit of work for a film director, and we have seen some great scenes in this year's films. Shall I go first with my list?
Yes, you have to, really.
I'm sorry to say it's a short list of 4 once again. I'm going to make you fight hard and long for your scenes. I am going to nominate Napoleon, although there was plenty that we didn't like about that film. That central sequence, the Battle of Austerlitz, is a pretty remarkable piece of filmmaking. I don't know whether people will still be watching Napoleon in 50 years' time, but they may be watching that sequence of the Battle of Austerlitz because it's a remarkable set of images, and it shows that Ridley Scott still knows where to put the camera and how to do it. So that came top of my list. Very different, although still featuring four-legged friends, the closing scene of EO, the donkey film that we saw quite earlier on in the film, where after going on all of his adventures, he ends up in the queue for the abattoir. I found that film, that scene, tremendously memorable. It's the only scene that we have seen all year which made me literally cry out loud when it came up on screen. I shouted out "no" at the screen when it came on. And it's not often that you're moved by a modern film quite as momentously as that. Can you be moved momentously? Is that a tautology? I think maybe I'll come back and digitally edit that out later on. My third suggestion, the bomb test sequence in Oppenheimer, another epic, overlong, rather overhyped historical film with one impressive sequence at its heart. I think that bomb test is the reason why the whole film exists, Oppenheimer, and it's a very skillful little bit of filmmaking. It's just a shame about all the white men arguing in small rooms on either side of that sequence. And then finally, I'm going to hark back to last week's film. We watched The Holdovers. And there were lots of memorable scenes in The Holdovers. But the one I am going to single out is a silent scene Mary Lamb, who is the cook, who has lost her son to the Vietnam War, goes to visit her. I think, is it her sister?
It's her sister, yeah.
A sister in Boston. Yeah. And the sister is pregnant, exactly. And she goes back to her childhood bedroom, and she has some little baby shoes that her son wore, and she just takes them out of a box and looks at them. And she doesn't say anything because the scene tells you everything you need to know.
Yep.
And then the sister, who is pregnant, comes in from behind her and gives her a hug. Yeah. And just this one simple silent scene expressed so much and expressed it so well. It's a beautifully made, beautifully written, beautifully conceived little scene. Reminded me a little bit of the scene that we nominated last year from Everything Everywhere All at Once, where you have a little moment of quiet calm in between all the chaos. I think it has that flavour. What have you got on your list?
That's nice. And I was going to say that scene also is set up really well. Like, there's a lot invested in the box, even before we see her leaving for Boston, that there's something in that box. It's a hat box, I believe. Yeah. And then Angus has to carry it with care and help her up the stairs. So there's a lot invested in it, so you know that's going to be meaningful when she opens that box. So good filmmaking. For me, I only have two.
Okay.
This is my honorable mention. I'll start with that. I love I call it a bro-splaining song in Barbie, where Ryan Gosling emotes and strums his guitar around a beachy bonfire with more and more Kens there, and they're all emoting their innermost thoughts and feelings to their Barbie girlfriends. And I just found it hilarious, and it really kind of summed up that whole film in one moment to me. I thought it was great. But my actual winner is the breadless bread scene in the menu. In part, Ralph Fiennes is so good. He's explaining the history of bread as the food of the common folk, and he refuses to serve it to his elite and wealthy guests at the restaurant. And they go on to, they're amazed by his decision. Some of them are incredulous, and others are really impressed by it. And they talk about his genius, and but the food critic criticizes the quality of the emulsion in some of the little dips that he's left with no bread. And I noticed I went back and watched it, and he's actually framed as if wearing this tricorn hat. He looks a little bit like Napoleon in the scene as well, as he's berating them. And Ralph Fiennes is just so good in that role. He's so good in that scene. So for me, that really stood out as the one scene that I thought was the best of the year, really. Because I thought it was intellectual, it was visual, it was just very strong. It was a very strong statement kind of scene, and worked on so many different levels. So those are my two. I don't know if you can come over to my side. I really, in hindsight, EO's not a film that I was a fan of, but that was kind of the appropriate ending, and he's running into the line of all these other animals that are going off to slaughter. So if anything, I would, of your scenes, that would be my favorite of those. But I think you're right about the baby shoes in the holdovers. It is a very nice moment. So I'm giving you a little bit of space either to come over and join me, or I'm willing to come over to your side.
I do love a compromise. But although the bread scene in the menu does contain probably the funniest gag in the film, and it's certainly, I think, probably the most memorable single moment in the film, probably the most skillfully written moment in the film. Yeah. I don't think I would feel a little bit cheap coming over to your side when I think my nominations carry a little bit more emotional heft. Okay. So I'm going to stick my stake in the ground, and I'm going to hang my hat on the baby shoes in the holdovers.
Yeah.
And I'm going to ask you to come over and join me, because if I don't, I'm just going to cry at that scene again, I think.
Oh yeah, for the children, for the lost son and the newborn baby. Yeah. How can I? I'm not even going to be that person. I'm no Scrooge here. I'm not going to put up a fight. That's a beautiful moment. Shall we move on to Actor of the Year?
Yes.
I only have one nomination. That's how clear this one was to me. Really, 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 as in reality, as in Sydney Sweeney playing a reality winner in the film. Reality. It's that simple.
Sydney Sweeney is not an actor with whose work I was at all familiar before seeing her in reality. And since then, I've seen her crop up in a few things. She's in like a Rolling Stones video at the moment.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And she's kind of doing a bunch of other movies. I think she's in a kind of, a DC superhero movie coming out in the fairly near future, or maybe it might be a Marvel Sony movie, I think. And is she in Madame Web? She's kind of diversifying. She's doing a bunch of stuff. And most of the material that I've seen her in, I think the films that she is in seem very keen to demonstrate that she has a fantastic figure, and that's the only thing they're going to concentrate on.
Yeah.
And I think in reality, she does a truly fantastic job with some remarkable material. She utterly rises to it. I've put 3 nominations on my Actor of the Year list. I'm going to tell you what they are, and I think by the time I get to the end of my list, you will know who I'm going to suggest we give the award to.
Okay.
I have nominated Paul Giamatti for The Holdovers, because he's a terrific actor, terrific performance, terrific role, so watchable in that film. But yeah, it's not a terribly surprising nomination. Anybody who's seen that film will know how watchable he is.
Yeah.
For my second nomination, I've nominated Dominic Sessa in The Holdovers.
Wow.
First movie this kid has ever been in, and he's utterly knocked it. I'm going to say knocked it out of the park. How can I say that when I'm placing a call to the Cliche Squad every week? I'm going to shot myself in and spend a night in the cell just for saying that. But he comes to the screen with so much confidence and charisma. I have little doubt that we'll be seeing plenty of him over the next 10, 20, 30 years. What a performance, what a performer. My third nomination for Actor of the Year is Sydney Sweeney for Reality, who, just knocked my socks off. Fantastic performance in a film which is about so much. Especially in a film which takes its script from something so very specific. How can you take an utterly specific dialogue between real people and turn it into a story which encompasses so much?
Yeah.
I think the way you do it is through an outstanding performance. I agree with you. I think your nomination is the right one. We should give it to Sydney Sweeney.
Yeah. Good. Oh, that was easy.
Absolutely. I hope maybe she gets more serious roles where she can keep her clothes on. Yeah. Which is not to sound puritanical, and if she wants to take her clothes off, good for her. Yeah. Fantastic. But you don't need to. Well, this is great there, in which case it means that I get to announce the award for Clunker of the Year.
Lucky you.
Well, have we seen any clunkers this year?
Oh, God, yes. Oh, yes.
I would say I think we've probably seen more clunkers this year than last year. I think maybe, I don't know.
My memory doesn't serve. I know that I have 4 potential nominations. So
I've only got 2 on my list, but I think it's because I was feeling pretty charitable when I came down to it. I don't think there's anything which has been quite such a barefaced, obvious clunker as Jurassic World : Dominion : Empire : What's Going On Here, which we gave the award to last year, which was truly a clunker of astonishing proportions.
That was easy, yeah.
Shall I give you my noms first? I've only put 2 in my list, and I don't know whether you will agree with them or not. First on my list, I'm sorry to say, and not everyone will agree with this, but I think it is a clunker, is Oppenheimer. And I know people will tell you, well, how can a 3-hour biopic make more than $800 million at the box office, something like that, if it was a clunker? But I'm afraid I came away from Oppenheimer impressed by that middle 15-minute sequence, but terribly bored and disappointed by the rest of the film that is hanging around it, I think. I think there is a fascinating story to tell about the life of Robert Oppenheimer, but I don't think we've seen it yet because it's not this film.
No, it's not.
My other nomination, a little bit more obvious of a clunker, the tremendously clunky, rather embarrassing Cocaine Bear, where I think the very funniest bit of the film is the title, and everything else after that is kind of a bit of a disappointment.
Yes.
and I'm guessing that most of the people involved in that film feel about as embarrassed about it as I do.
Well, Cocaine Bear is one of my dishonorable mentions for sure. It just seemed so easy to make a better film, and it didn't happen. So that's definitely a clunker. Another under the radar clunker. I thought EO was a clunker in part because it was just heralded as this great art film, and I just never really enjoyed it. So I got a couple lower level clunkers there, but I really think for a clunker to really clunk, it's got to be a big film.
They need to spend a lot of money to make the loudest noise.
Exactly.
Yes.
So I've got two bigger films that I think are clunkers. I thought The Killer was a clunker.
Okay, I can see where you're coming from.
I'm glad for David Fincher and everyone else's sake that it didn't really ever go to a theater, as far as I could tell. I didn't do much business in one because it was a sort of an under the radar clunker as a result. But I think there's this one film that it's even bigger, and it's my duty to proclaim what a piece of crap this film was. So I think I need to give the biggest clunker of the year to a film that a lot of critics have hoodwinked audiences by saying it's good, and that film is Oppenheimer. I loathed that film quite intensely, so I would love to agree with you on that one, if I may, and say that is, without question, the clunker of the year.
I agree, sadly so. The reason that I am glad that we watched Oppenheimer is because you taught me all about the Hollywood technique for tying up a horse after watching Oppenheimer. And I think it was worth sitting through that 3-hour clunker in order to enjoy that gag. But apart from that, not much to be said for it. Absolutely. Sadly, bums on seats. But clunker of the year for us.
Yeah, and I love the point you're making that a film that's practically made $1 billion on this podcast is the clunker of the year. We're doing good work, yeoman's work here. Do I get
that? Means you know what you get now.
Pardon me?
Oh no, I cut you off. Like all the very best award show hosts. What were you going to say?
I was just going to say to that. Does that bring us to best script? But I don't want to move on.
It does.
I don't want to move on if you're not ready to.
See, if we had written a script for this show, then that would have been an awful lot more slick, wouldn't it?
Yes. This one, I'm going to give you two options, and you're probably not going to agree with either one of them.
I like this already.
It's funny because my preferred film I put down as my lesser nomination. I really want to give this Best Script Award to The Menu. In part because I think it really has a lot to say about life and the world, but it also is just a very refreshing, very unique and original film. And I think a lot of that is just in the script directly. And I think obviously it's also really well directed script too. So I think it's Mark Mylod really knows what to do with a good script, I think. So I'm going to say that that's really my preferred one. But I also really liked Blackberry.
Ah, wow. Okay, great.
Like that was a rare example of someone taking what really could have been a super mundane story, and they've turned it into just this little gem that got made. It was a smart script in terms of the writing. It was not an expensive film to make, I doubt anyway. Those writers had to write cheap. That's not easy to do, especially when you want to make a really good film, but it's exactly what happened. So The Menu is my preferred choice. Blackberry, I thought, though, was actually a really, really good script.
See, I have made 3 nominations, and I think they're a little bit more predictable and boring than your interesting ones. Insofar as I also have put Blackberry down as my second choice. I went into that film with low expectations, and it turned out to be smart, clever, snappy, fast-moving, pacey, plenty to enjoy, with a real point, nicely drawn characters. Just hit the tone right. It was an impressive script and an impressive film. As I think you said maybe last week, maybe it was this week, if you've got a good script and if you've got good actors, you've got a chance of making something good. Yeah. And that's just what we saw with Blackberry. Yeah. My other 2 nominations, probably a little bit more boring and staid, The Holdovers.
Yeah.
Because, it's a lovely script, maybe a little bit too pat, but plenty of opportunities for 3 great actors to riff off each other and give us a lot to enjoy and plenty of memorable moments. And then my other best script nomination, a script which is adapted pretty closely from a book, Women Talking.
Oh, yeah.
Very play-like, largely just people sitting around in a room talking, and that doesn't necessarily mean the best script, but in this case, I think covered a lot of ground. It drew appropriately from the book that it was based on, and ended up with a proper, tense, well-structured 2-hour story.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, out of all those, and this is kind of the award that's closest to our hearts. Okay, well, I'm prepared to sacrifice the holdovers because it's the obvious choice, and I'm prepared to sacrifice women talking because it does owe an awful lot, good script though it is, to the book that it comes from. I'm going to cling on to Blackberry, and I'm going to ask you to persuade me a little bit harder why I should give it to the menu over that film.
I'm perfectly ready to settle on Blackberry with you. Menu, I think, again, it's just very original. I don't think we saw anything nearly as daring or unique in the entire year. I thought there was great dialogue. I thought that each scene was set up really well, and things built on one another really, really well. So I just think it's great. For me, the other thing is this is my kind of film. It's that dark comedy that has some real political undercurrents running through it. I just loved it. But having said that, again, Blackberry was a fantastic little film, and it's this little miracle, I think. So I think that probably the script has more to do with the success of that film than the menu script would have to do with the success of its film, because you had bigger stars in the menu. You've got a more established director in the menu. So I would say that I think Blackberry, you've got to just assume that script really held that film together in a way that the menu didn't have to. So I'm impressed by how they took something as mundane as the development of the Blackberry and turned it into a really interesting film. So I think we can say the Blackberry. I'm okay with that. Okay,
let's go with Blackberry then. Yeah, if there's any phrase that will capture my heart, it's mini miracle.
Yeah.
When all those little elements come together and you get something that's really a little bit magical.
Yeah,
that's when it's.
And I think the Holdovers is definitely up there as well. The only thing that I found about the Holdovers is it didn't seem super original to me in the way that those other two films were. Those are two films I've never seen before. I'd never seen anything really like them. Whereas the Holdovers, as great as it is, there's not tons of new material there.
Yeah. Skillful writing is great, but originality, that's something genuinely to be praised and celebrated. I agree. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Blackberry it is.
All right.
Which brings us to the most exciting award of the year.
Oh, yeah.
I'm thrilled to be holding the envelope which will decide which film contained Best Hat of the Year. And I'm so excited about this award, I even wrote a little spiel. It's been a big year for hats, I wrote in my notebook. We've had the return of Indiana Jones, who has the most famous hat in cinema, maybe. We had Oppenheimer, and the film wasn't great, but the hat was nice. Ooh, nice. We had Barbie's pink Stetson, and you know how personally attached I am to that hat.
You look good in the one, too,
We even had Keith Gill's beanie hat in Dumb Money. It's been just wall-to-wall hats.
Yeah.
In 2023, who would have guessed it would be the year of the hat?
Yeah, I know.
But it has been. Do you have any nominations for what you think must surely be Best Hat of the Year?
I have just one.
Ooh.
It's and I feel good about this. This is making me feel good because I hated this movie so passionately. The hat in Oppenheimer, it's really the best part of the film. Or is it the only good part of the film? It doesn't matter, right? Oppenheimer's hat, great. And Cillian Murphy looks great in it too, so I'm going with that.
He does.
Yeah.
Yeah, that boy can wear a hat, absolutely. I have two slightly different nominations insofar as I have Napoleon, which had not only a spectacular hat, but thousands of them. There were a lot of hats in that film. Seriously, if you were a hat guy, that was your picture this year.
Yep.
And we got to enjoy Napoleon having a little hole blown in his hat in the climax of the film.
Yeah.
Which felt a little bit like a metaphor for the whole film.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not sure that Napoleon can quite compare to the hat worn by the main character in David Fincher's The Killer.
Oh, yeah.
Because if that wasn't an ugly hat, I don't know what an ugly hat is. And the fact that was the basis of his gag about his disguise being an outfit worn by a German tourist he'd once seen. That was the one moment that keyed me into the notion that this film is actually a comedy, albeit a comedy which is not funny.
Yes.
I didn't chuckle a lot, but I think it is a comedy, and I think the hat is the key to the comedy.
Yeah.
I'm going to argue that Oppenheimer has already had one award in this list, and I don't think it deserves to put on its a DVD release. I don't want it to put on the Blu-ray winner of 2 awards at the Two Reel Cinema Club.
Fair enough.
So I'm gonna ask you to come over to my side and vote for The Killer.
Killers, that is definitely a great hat. We grew up with a bunch of those. We had those hats at our house growing up. They're terrible. It's not really sure. It's not clear. I guess it's a sun hat. But I think it's a sun hat specifically for someone who doesn't have a lot of hair, because there's not a lot of visor to it. It is a ridiculous hat. But in terms of sunscreen and protection, I can embrace that. I'd lean a little bit more towards Napoleon's hat, though, especially the one he's wearing it's kind of the classic one, but it's extra special when he's meeting Josephine at that first party. I think it looks just fantastic. So I prefer the Napoleon hat, but I'm willing to come over to the
let's go with Napoleon then. You've persuaded me.
Yeah,
I haven't compromised much this year, so I will join you for Napoleon.
It's a work of art. That hat is. I mean, whereas the German tourist hat is, there's nothing artful about it, but the Napoleon hat is a thing of beauty. Does that take us to the big moment?
I think it does.
Film of the year.
Film of the year.
I have an envelope here, and there is only one title here, so I felt pretty strongly about this one.
Okay, well, interesting. I have an envelope. I have 2 titles, but one of them is written in thicker ink than the other. I'm interested to know what you've got in your envelope then, yeah.
What kind of envelope are you holding?
Oh!
Is it over your head or under your head?
Tell me more about your nomination for Film of the Year.
Well, I'm very excited about seeing Maestro, which we're going to see after this awards ceremony. So I'm hoping that's good. But I really loved finishing the year this year with a film called The Holdovers, Alexander Payne's recent film. I just felt like it hit all the right notes. It was really well written. It's really well directed. It's really well acted. So it just has this gravitas about it, even though it's got these wonderfully ridiculous comic scenes in there. Whereas The Killer was a comedy that wasn't funny. The Holdovers is basically a comedy and a drama. That's what they call the dramedy these days. And it is funny, and it is thoughtful and wonderful. It's really just everything I like in a film. So I'm going to say The Holdovers, and I didn't give you any other options to debate me on. So I'm hoping Holdovers is in that envelope of yours.
Well, so I have got two films in my envelope, and one of them is The Holdovers. You're absolutely right. The Holdovers, in a way, it kind of feels a little bit almost like a film that was made for me, or maybe a film that was made for us. Yeah. It feels like it hits so many of our touchstones. Yeah. There's something just a little bit, I'm not going to say perfect, but classical about its shape and its structure and its tone. When I look through the 2 columns of films that we've watched this year, the new films and the old films, I often try to imagine, well, could any of those films on the left-hand column, the new films, could any of them happily sit in that right-hand column of the genuine classics, the films which have stood the test of time? Someone called the Cliche Squad again. Yeah. And of all of those films, maybe The Holdovers is the one film above all which people could still quite believably be watching and enjoying and laughing at and crying over in 40 years' time. Yeah. I don't know how many years it is since Sideways came out. Is it about 20? It's 19 years, I think, or 20 years?
Yeah, I'm going to say 2003, 4, 5, somewhere in there. So at least 18, yeah.
Yeah, we are close to 20 years. And I can easily imagine putting the Sideways in over the weekend and enjoying it just as much as the first time around. I rather suspect that in 20 years' time, you and I could settle down on the Two Reel Cinema Club sofa and watch The Holdovers and enjoy it as much this time, 20 years' time, as we did 2 weeks ago.
Absolutely.
So, Yeah, absolutely. I think The Holdovers is one for the ages, and it's a tragedy that there aren't more films that could fit into that pocket.
Yeah.
I am going to mix things up very slightly by telling you that there is one other film which I have written on the envelope in my hand, which is a film which hasn't otherwise come up, and probably has deserved to come up for some kind of award this year. And I'm a little bit surprised that neither of us is nominated for anything. It is a Belgian film that we watched quite early on in the year. About sweet love between two schoolboys, film called Close, which moved me a great deal. I think it's a very skillfully made, beautiful film. It's shocking, it's tragic, it's authentic, it's beautifully made. And it also has the advantage that it makes Belgium look like an absolutely fantastic place to live. Yeah. So for sheer sofa tourism, Close deserves an honourable mention, and I think I would feel bad if Close didn't get a shout out at some point during the film of the year noms. But for that said, maybe we still will be watching Close in 20 years' time. But I think The Holdovers will be on the shelf. The Holdovers is one of those films where someone might buy me the script for Christmas. The Holdovers is one of those films that has earned its place in the pantheon, I think.
I agree with you. Close was a fantastic film. I'm trying to remember, did we pair that with Boys Don't Cry, possibly?
We did, that's right, yes.
Okay. That was a great week of podcasting right there. I thought it was great, and the only reason I think I suggested that because I'd seen it at the museum here. I mean, I don't know if you'd even heard of it. It just had such a low profile, so it does deserve a huge shout out, and at the very least, a proper honorable mention. Most of my mentions today have been dishonorable mentions, so that actually does carry some weight. That actually means something today on the podcast. Is that it is a film very worthy of best film of the year. I think what you said about The Holdovers just being in our wheelhouse on this podcast, I think it has to be The Holdovers. But please, everybody, just try and find Close somewhere because it is such a good film. It's really well made, and it's like every moment in that film means something. There's nothing really wasted. It's a lovely film.
So, Two Real Cinema Club film of the year, The Holdovers. You heard it here first. It's gonna score at the Oscars, isn't it?
It should. It absolutely should. So we've given it 2 awards, and we nearly gave it a third. We gave it Scene of the Year, came very close to being our best script, and Film of the Year. So obviously this film was good. It was a great way to close out our season and our year of films for sure.
I'm going to recap the winners this year, just so that they know exactly where to come to collect their awards. Best film not released this year: Once Upon a Time in the West, Sergio Leone. I've got to see the rest of his films. Yeah. Scene of the year: The Baby Shoes and The Holdovers. Can't argue with that. Actor of the year: Sydney Sweeney. In reality, well, who saw that coming? But good for her. Looking forward to seeing her appear in more films over the next few years. Clunker of the year: well, we didn't have to argue very hard over this. It's Oppenheimer. Sorry. Best script of the year, surprise, surprise, Blackberry, A Mini Miracle. If ever I was associated with a film that was a mini miracle, I would feel pretty proud. Yeah. I think the people who made Blackberry should feel proud.
Very proud.
Best hat of the year, how could it not be Napoleon? Yeah. I can't believe that I suggested the killer would take that gong. No, it's Napoleon. If ever there were a film based on a hat, it's that one.
Good hat.
Film of the year, Alexander Payne, returns to form. The Holdovers, fantastic to see Paul Giamatti back on screen. Yeah. Always got time for him. Yep. Dominic Sessa is going to be a one to watch. Let's see what happens to them.
Yeah.
And thanks to everybody for joining us for the year, for joining us for this episode. Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year.
We will see you in 2024. Oof. Or I hope another... It's going to be 23, 24, 25 new films, 23, 24, 25 old films, and we will figure out which is the best.
Yes.
From the Two Real Cinema Club, Happy New Year, and we'll see you next year. How's that? Is that all right?
Great. Love the awards show.
I feel like, oh, shame we can't do it like 4 times a year. I was enjoying it.